Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I'm Kasey Jones.
And I'm Ashleigh Early.
And today we are super excited to have Micah Zayner joining us. And I'm particularly excited because it sounds like he's got a really similar journey in life as I do. Micah is a passionate salesperson who consistently ran into marketing programs that siloed themselves away from sales. Understanding this pain point, he made a career pivot to marketing and demand gen with a company that believed in his desire to have a close relationship with sales. Micah, super similar to my story. He is now the demand architect, great title, at Gravitational, a secure cloud application delivery platform where he is injecting a forward-thinking philosophy into marketing and sales. So welcome, Micah. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So like I mentioned, this is a very, very similar story to kind of my trajectory of starting in sales, seeing some kind of some broken relationships between sales and marketing and wanting to be a part of changing that. So give us a little bit of your backstory of kind of how that journey took place. Like how did you make the decision that you wanted to make that pivot? And B, how did you find that right role that let you make that jump? Because I think for a lot of folks out there, it's a hard transition to make. It's hard to kind of find the right opportunity that's going to let you make that transition. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll start from the beginning. Initially, my sales journey started out in the 2000s era. High school, I started cold calling for the New York Times and really got an understanding of what it meant to sell what the customer considers being sold to. I really got an understanding of what that means. And throughout life, I was in different systems, different organizations until leading up to my move to the Bay Area, I started helping my brother build his e-commerce company. And there it was, it really was an understanding of like, okay, I've got all these hats. We're pretty popular. We had a really good Kickstarter campaign. And my brother was kind of like good at being famous. And so we had to like play these different games with our advertising and like how we did our email marketing to institutions that we thought were good candidates and how we did our email marketing to people who had already purchased from our site. And so I really had an understanding of that from there. And then going to my my first tech sales role. So it's really hard to get into tech sales. You have to, you have to have done the right things, right? You have to. And so I fortunately was shown Sales Boot Camp, which is now Vendition.
Always some plugs for them. They're great guys. It's a great team over there.
Yeah. And from there, I was like, oh, I was just missing, like, I'm really good at sales. I was just missing the formula and the way that tech sales uses tools to express themselves. I had the calling down. I can walk into any establishment and shake somebody's hand and introduce myself down. But understanding the power that these new tools held was something I wasn't familiar with. And after I understood that, I was able to go off and get a job at LaunchDarkly, who at the time was Series B. Revenue was okay, promising future. And I was part of their first BDR team there. And what happened there was they moved the BDR team from sales into marketing, which some orgs do. I think it's relevant to do that as marketing gains the most understanding of who the ICP is and what the language is that
Absolutely.
is effective. And I think giving marketing control over that outbound program along with the inbound is relevant. And so, but when we were there really wasn't a whole lot of communication between that current VP of marketing and our BDR team. And it was a real struggle because I'm addicted to databases and clienteling and data and understanding information and predicting trends and doing all these things. And I'm doing this as like an outbound leader on our team. I'm managing the entire United States basically, and pointing out to different people like, yo, look at, there's like 5 people from the same team opening emails from our campaigns. We should try to do something maybe on LinkedIn or reach out to them personally. And it was just difficult not having the support of the entire marketing department behind these ideas. And this is where like the major story starts. But yeah, so that was my pain point, was like, wow, I have all of this information in my head. And if I could just understand what the demand gen person was doing and what lists they were sending to and what their intentions were, then we could align and have a really powerful force. And every time it came to me having these discussions, my VP did not really appreciate them. So it led to me.
That was very diplomatic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't expect anybody to understand. Understanding is it's a choice, right? Yeah, I guess that's where you could say it's just a choice. And so yeah. If you are on a level where you've investigated all of these things and you're in a community of people like ours that we participate in, where we're constantly sharing the newest of the new. You know, this isn't something that some director of marketing did at New Relic, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and it keeps repeating. Like, our systems constantly have to be changing and evolving to work. Yeah. And so it's you just have to keep being the best you and moving forward. And that's when I went and looked for a role somewhere else. And I'm at that new role here at Gravitational. And it's really funny. I didn't expect to find exactly what I was looking for. I think that's something we fear as individuals when we're in a painful situation and we're like, oh, I'll never find something as good as this. Yeah. So it was definitely a fear and an anxiety, and I fall in love with my coworkers. I think it helps with my job. And so, like, I think a lot of my fear and anxiety of leaving was about hurting those individuals. Like, I always kind of like didn't want to have a negative impact on them, understanding how impacting I was on the entire team as a whole as well. Like, if you're a top performer and you leave. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. So
I'm curious then, how did you decide that marketing was the shift that you wanted to make? Because it is a big leap. So, just really quickly, like, I ran the inbound SDR team, so I started partnering with marketing a lot, and so that helped me like pull back the curtain, I guess, and get more insight and figure out that that's what I wanted to do. How did you, like, what did you learn? What kinds of questions were you asking? What kinds of meetings were you taking to help you figure out that that was the right next step for you?
I think what I really got into as a BDR was building filters for ICPs and doing reports in Salesforce of like every title attached to an opportunity all time, and then using that report and filtering by number of incidences of each title showing up. And then you have this like kind of chronological list of like potency of title versus however many titles have shown up. And so I started getting into building out these filters. I am a big fan of the tool Apollo. I know I'm not trying to like promote. They're very sneaky in regards to like how powerful they are. I don't think people
Yeah.
understand how powerful the database management platform is in regards to Apollo. Everybody has their own automatic email sequencing services, and you can call from in the platform and you can do all these things. But what Apollo does the best is it lets you immediately, if you say, find me every person from XYZ title and XYZ company with XYZ employee numbers that have opened XYZ amount of times within your emailing campaigns in the city of Chicago. I could find that in 30 seconds. In Salesforce, it's going to take me 25 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe more. In other platforms, you can't even do it. You can't go into Outreach and really find that type of information. You can't
Yeah.
go into SalesLoft and find
It's custom builds. I've had to do it. And I'll say
Yeah.
Apollo is great with stuff like that. The other thing I love that Apollo does is it flags job alerts better than anything else I've seen.
Yeah,
So it's really
love
great
it.
to be like, hey, somebody switched companies. Yay, prospecting list. But
Yeah,
so we're talking about operations and all this stuff, and clearly you're talking to a couple of other data nerds here. How did you learn these tools? Because that's something I know a lot of sales reps struggle with, is the tools feel like this kind of mythical beast they never really get a chance to figure out how to use, and they might know some basics, but how did you get good and get fluent with all those filters and those reports so you could find those insights?
I think it came down to, well, so here's the one thing about sales that's really interesting. It is the only job title where hours spent equals more money.
Yeah.
And so, and that's one of the reasons, honestly, why I transitioned to marketing was I needed to get away from that addiction of like, oh, but if I just spend a few more hours, that means X more dollars in my pocket. And I spent so much time because I understood in sales that it not only is hours spent equals more money, but efficiency of X equals more money. So the better you're spending those hours, the better you're emailing the correct prospects with the correct attention and the correct messaging. I wish I could show you I'm getting really into programmatic emailing. And so I'm using if then else statements, but not like, oh, just one if then else statement, like if vertical exists, then post vertical. If not, then post your industry. I'm getting into like, if vertical is computer, or if industry is computer software, then put this message. If, and then like, or like title persona, and so I'm getting really into even like social proofing. Like if you're going to social proof from your company and you've got this whole bill of customers, why not put the customers that are in that person's industry in that email instead of putting like IBM, Microsoft? Everybody's got IBM, Microsoft, and
they buy everybody.
Well, but that's always the worst thing too, when like you're a startup and you get a prospecting email and all of the companies they reference are like massive enterprise, and you're like, then what does this have to do with me? Or that it's from a completely different industry. And yeah, I think that's very, very smart. It's funny, like I always think the best marketers are almost like lazy marketers, because you're constantly looking for hacks of how to do it more efficiently, how to do it more effectively. And I shouldn't say that that's different than other industries.
I was going to say sales is the same way. I've always said the best, it's like if you want something done quickly, if you want something done quickly and well, ask a lazy person, because they'll figure out the most efficient way to do it as quickly as possible. And it's something what I found really interesting, actually, what you said is the addiction to hours equaling money.
Yeah.
That's I've never heard that take on it before, but you're absolutely right.
It was bad. It was me waking up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. because I knew my emails would be starting on the East Coast, and seeing if anybody had responded. Like it was an unhealthy relationship with what I was doing. And I think it got so unhealthy because I had so little control. I had such a little relationship with my marketing department that it was like, I need to know more information. I need to, like, it became all dependent on like my shoulders. And I was doing this for my team too. I was pointing out my team's, momentum and my team's ability to close their territories as well. So it was like, it started getting pretty, overwhelming. And after not being respected for my appreciation and love for the medium and the company, I was giving SE demos at trade shows. Like, I was in love with this company, my team, my coworkers, the customers, like the prospects. I knew, like, you could say, oh, who was interested in us from Uline, and I would know the name, the title, how many times they opened, what emails they were interested in. Like, I was that kind of person. And so not having that respect,
It's
it
toxic.
became, yeah, it became a time where I was like, all right, I have to look somewhere else, that's going to love me as much as I love their product and their company.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point. Like, we've been talking more and more about this, and particularly, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work that Uncrushed is doing around, bringing attention to mental health in business, and particularly in the sales community. But I think the way you talk about this, the addiction to always be doing more, always finding one more thing you can do because those hours translate to more money. It's something that I think we're starting to talk about more, but not as much as we really need to.
Mm-hmm.
And what it really sounds like from your perspective is that it's this kind of perfect storm of the addiction of kind of becoming a workaholic around these things, while also not feeling recognized for that contribution and that work. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you feel like the culture or your managers could have done differently to maybe help you spot those issues sooner, or help you, I don't know, help you stem the tide of that kind of negative spiral that it sounds like it was so easy to get caught up in?
Yeah, I think another compounding negative aspect of it is when you have unlimited time off policies within these companies that have salespeople that work like this, and you have managers that are dependent on their top performers to not take time off because they need the top performers to shoulder 50% of the opportunity qualifications. And so these individuals end up becoming the hero. And it's like a mild hero. No company loves their BDR department. I mean, let's face it. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, you're expendable. Like, we were thinking about getting rid of you anyway." But
if you're
shit
lucky,
rolls downhill.
If you're lucky, we'll give you a promotion. Keep it up.
Yeah. And so I think the unlimited time off policies are they're dangerous if the managers aren't consistently influenced and encouraged to tell their subordinates to take time off, because I was never told to take time off. And I worked 16 months straight. I worked through company outings. I worked through holidays. I was the one who was writing into Slack saying, "Oh, closed another meeting on Christmas," or whatever. Like, it was, that was me. And it was something that again, it was an addiction that I allowed myself to get involved in. It was my first time in tech too. And I really wanted to be seen as somebody who could perform. And so I don't blame everybody. I don't blame anybody as much as I blame everybody, if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah.
No, I think that's,
that makes perfect sense.
It's a system.
Yeah.
So how did you recognize that you were falling victim to this? Like, what did it look like to you when you finally realized what was going on? Because I know a lot of times this stuff starts very insidiously. It's like, oh, I'm just going to leave alerts on my phone and and then next thing you know, it's 4 a.m.
Yeah. I think I started recognizing, well, I had a medical issue where, like, my whole, from like my neck down into my like rhomboids, up into my shoulder, and then all the way down my arm, where I was like up in the middle of the night with spasming from like just stress.
Oof.
And so like every 3 hours I would be able to take like ibuprofen and like ice it. And like every 3 hours I'd be up in the middle of the night, like trying to take care of it. And I went to the doctors, and the doctor's like, yeah, nothing's wrong with you. Maybe you should go get physical therapy. And so I started getting physical therapy. And throughout the physical therapy, it ended up being like I was receiving mental therapy, because
Yep.
the physical therapist is there with you, working on you, doing body work, and you're having conversations with them. And I'm talking to them about how stressful my job is. And they're like, well, maybe you should look for another one. And like, so you have this therapist there that's reminding you that you're valuable and you're important, and that there are other options. There are always other options. And I think through that time, I eventually started falling out of love with what I was once in love with. And it allowed me the time to start loving myself and appreciating myself, and not looking for that appreciation and love from somewhere else. And I kind of needed it, because the interview that I went in for with Gravitational, they weren't hiring for what I was applying for. I did some research on them. I found out that they had a 5 million seed round from Y Combinator and A28Z. And I was like, okay, that's 5 million seed rounds, pretty good. So I'm going to go investigate them a bit more. And then I saw that their founders had all already exited a company and been acquired. And so I was like, okay, so they have a 5 million seed and they've already exited. So they're on a good path of success right now. And then I found another article that said they doubled customers and revenue in the previous year. And I was like, wow, they're about to raise a pretty big Series A. I want to get in there and tell them they need me to run their marketing and sales, and just have an alignment between demand gen and the SDR org at an early stage, and really optimize their data integrity. You can get into some of these companies at Series B and Series C where they're like, all right, now we're going to like tighten up the data and make sure we know. And like they're unsubscribed.
And then cleaning it up is like a absolute nightmare. I think we've all had that experience where, and guess who winds up doing a lot of the grunt work of it? It's the BDRs. You know, and that's brutal. You're smart to go after that.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate to find the opportunity. And then I wrote a message hold on, I want to read it to you. This is funny. I wrote a message to the VP of sales. I said, I have the future business development architecture. I want to share it with a company that sees my value. Currently at my company, I changed the way the game was played there. I went off on my own and created a program with very little support from the BD manager, working with industry experts and my sales coach that flipped our program on its head. A year later, I turned down promotions looking for more of a strategy role, where I have a seat at the table and I'm recognized for the value I created. I'm a force of nature at trade shows. I can set up automation engine for both inbound and outbound that makes your pipeline flow like an oil field. I'm already in DevOps space and will need to learn very little to begin having an impact on your team. Can we meet for coffee? That's the message I sent him, and he responded that night. And from the day we met for coffee, I signed an offer letter in 5 days.
That's amazing.
So that is one of the best self pitches I think I've ever heard. And something I've been talking to a lot of people about lately, actually, is I think a lot of people, I know I can think of at least 5 salespeople off the top of my head that in the past month have shared with me that they struggle to pitch themselves.
Yeah.
So what was that process for writing that email like?
Well, so one thing I did early at LaunchDarkly when I was a BDR was I built out this dashboard that was just all about me. It was how many opportunities did I bring in? What was the pipeline value that I brought in? What was the close one? What stages for every opportunity was in my pipeline? And so I had this beautiful dashboard, like very colorfully designed with like little wheels and numbers. It wasn't just all like single digit numbers. It was like the little pie chart wheels and the different like graphs and things. And so it really taught me how to value myself and what my value I was to a company at an early stage in my career. And so I knew that I was valuable. I knew how much value I was creating. And not only when you're somebody that's not only a top performer, but influencing the entire organization, you know, not only these stats are my value, but then all of the kind of like hidden information that's in the other reps kind of like corner that has helped them get to where they are too. So it, I think that's something I recommend to a lot of the BDRs is, hey, build out a dashboard that proves your value to the company. So when you're negotiating a promotion or negotiating a raise, you know how much closed won ARR came from you. You know how many replies you've had that were positive. You know all of these things that so when they question you, you can say, no, this is me. This is what I've done.
So I just think this is super powerful, and I agree with Ashleigh. It's advice that so many, not just sales reps, so many people need to hear, and especially people who maybe come from challenging backgrounds or have dealt with trauma in their past. Like, what is your advice for how people can, when they do struggle to, I don't know, really talk about their worth and their value? What is some of the, not just, I think your advice of building that dashboard is amazing, but what is the mindset shift that you did internally to prompt you to do that work and to be consistent about it? Because I think it's that like first step of prompting someone to really be consistent about documenting their worth and their success. It's that step that I think a lot of people miss. So what would be your recommendation to someone else of how they can flip, make that little switch within their minds to do that work?
This is a tough one, and it's a culmination of a lot of events. You know how like when you first started writing your resume and there was that one person who just made things sound way better than you did?
Yeah. That might have been me.
You were the person that made
I was the one all my friends came to and paid me to write their resumes.
And so that was definitely a gift, right? Because you are the biggest critic of yourself. And so the language that you use in your head towards yourself, one, needs to change. So how you think of yourself, how your inner voice speaks to yourself, all of those things you need to start, one, documenting it and acknowledging like, all right, I kind of am dismissive of myself, or I kind of am self-deprecating. And if you tend to have that personality, it's really hard to be in sales if you're self-deprecating, because it's easy to get into those mental states of doubt, self-doubt, and disbelief. And so I think understanding that the language you use about yourself is primary. And then I've always invested in, I wrote a post on my LinkedIn that was like the 15 books that changed my career in sales. And a lot of them can be quite like motivational speaker-ish. I'm a big fan of throwing on some Tony Robbins if I'm ever feeling a little bad about myself. He has these motivational videos on YouTube that are just like, it's not from him, it's like a mix that somebody makes of him just like telling me to love myself. So I know he hasn't had the best reputation as of late, but the just really understanding how much it takes to nobody's going to give you it, and if you don't have the audacity and the confidence to ask for it, it's not going to come. So you have to like believe.
I love this, and I think this is such good advice. It's really funny. I think especially those of us that tend to sort of be, I don't know, skeptics, we stay away from the things that just like unabashedly kind of pump you up. And there's a little bit of the fake it till you make it when it comes to this stuff, right? If you listen to these things, if you repeat them to yourself often enough, they really start to kind of stick stick in your brain and stick in your heart and kind of turn the tide. So I think, these are very, very powerful recommendations for everybody out there.
Yeah, I think, even with something as simple as bringing up what happened to Lizzo recently, with the shaming, and it's like, if she feels that way about herself, let her feel that way about herself. We don't have to sit here and try to control her identity. And I think that's what happened, is right. Like, you should be able to control your identity. And I think that's what this whole movement is socially that we're having as youth in this country and in the world is control your identity. You don't have to be who somebody said you are. You don't have to be what your previous job says you are. You don't have to be what your resume says you are. You can be whoever you want right now, because you could have read 30 books yesterday and completely changed who you are mentally, right? And so I think this is a conversation. So after LaunchDarkly, I took 50 days off and I did the whole find myself again thing. And I went to art school initially for university. And so the whole trip, I went to all my artist friends and I crashed on their couch and I stayed and I just talked about art and I invested in who it was that made me who I was before I got into tech sales. And so one of the conversations I was having with my friend Reggie Baylor, who's a very phenomenal mind, he actually is coming up with this theory of cultural storytelling as a service. And so a lot of these companies don't know how to speak to people of color. And so he's coming up with this whole branding experience of being able to sell cultural storytelling to these tech companies that don't quite know how to evaluate that process. But we're having this conversation and we came up with this concept that human beings, are you familiar with how electrons are not definable until we look at them? And then
it's a variant of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
It's you just can't define
particle
it
physics.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like that with humans, right? We aren't really quite definable until we look at a human and say, this is you, right? You're this, 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 and this, based on all of these societal things that I try to categorize people with. But in reality, you're changing every moment, every job you have, every conversation you have with an individual, every eye contact experience you make, the way your brain works, it's a constantly evolving thing. And sure, there might be some foundational definitions, but in the end, we get to be whoever we want to be. And we should just, if you think that you're a top performer in sales, keep being a top performer in sales. If you think you're better off in marketing and you understand marketing principles more and your resume doesn't say marketing anywhere on it, go join marketing and sell somebody the idea that you are the marketer that you say you are. And I think that's really hard, though, when everybody's telling us we're something else.
Yeah.
So, and this brings up something I've been struggling with a lot lately, both professionally and personally. And I know, Kasey, I think you've got a variant of this as well, without stepping out of line. How do you separate your personal identity from the company that's paying you? Because so often it's, I'm Ashleigh, I work with other side of sales. It's one thought, the salespeople and the employer. And that's what we say all day, every day. Hi, I'm Name with X company. So how do you create that definition?
I think what's interesting and what I've started to realize the potential behind is your LinkedIn account, your social availability. So all of the connections that I made while I was at LaunchDarkly, all of the conversations I had while I was at LaunchDarkly, they had those conversations with me because I was an educator in the information that I was giving them, and was a voice of reason, a voice of information that was relevant and forward thinking. And so after leaving LaunchDarkly, I still now have all of those people that are connected to me. And so I'm now more of a brand than that being fully dependent on, oh, they connected with me because I worked at LaunchDarkly. No, they connected with me because I had cool stuff to say. And so now when I go to the next place, and this is one of the slides I actually showed in my, I had to give a presentation to the executive board at Gravitational for the job. And one of the slides was, these are all of the logos that I have solid industry connections with VPs, directors, C-suite, that people who will have conversations with me. And that's valuable. And so if you are a BDR or an SDR and you're thinking, oh, like I don't really understand my value. Well, if you've got a black book, which is your LinkedIn connection profile, and you've got people that have had conversations with you, and what's great about LinkedIn is the entire message chain that you have with somebody, it's historically saved. So you have all
There's
of
no
those
deleting.
No, I mean, you can, but like
You
it's
can't,
not.
you literally
So,
can't delete it.
yeah. So it's like, it's
Yeah.
pretty powerful, man. It's it's fascinating. So then when we start talking about this, what's becoming really big is building your brand, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you're Ashleigh at the other side of sales and I'm Micah at Gravitational, in my mind, I'm really Micah, the cool dude that makes money move, right? Like that's who I think of myself. Like, how do I get this one guy at my previous company used to call it attention dollars. Like you have ARR and then you have attention dollars. And so how much attention is your company getting in the social channels? How much attention is your company getting on Reddit? How much attention is your company getting at conferences? You know, do you have a group of people standing around your booth, or do you have like onesie twosies walking by going, oh, this is interesting? And that's where the marketing side comes in. And that's where I really enjoy. Like, sure, ARR is our goal, but attention is the foundation for ARR these days.
Yeah.
No longer, people bring up like, oh, everybody uses IBM or whatever. And it's like, that's never going to happen again.
No, and it is especially early on when nobody knows who you are. It's those attention dollars that really change the game. And but I think you also make a really good point that your own LinkedIn profile, your own social media presence, your own personal brand, that's your personal attention dollars. And I think oftentimes it takes a little too long for a lot of us to recognize that making those deposits, really investing in that side of your own kind of your own personal brand is incredibly valuable, and in ways that you won't be able to measure. It's not just in how much you make, it's also the friendships you form, the relationships you have, the things
podcasts you start.
The podcasts you start.
Podcasts that you join as a guest.
Exactly. Like those things can be super, super valuable. And oftentimes it takes us a while to recognize that it's worth putting the time and really investing in that.
And it a lot of times I'll say this, and Mike, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too. It takes a while for it to show. For me, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I think it took me about a year of trying to do it quasi consistently to start seeing a little bit of a return. Like it took a while. It was a slow build.
I think it's similar to like planting anything though, right? Like you put the seed in the soil doesn't mean that the plant's going to show up tomorrow.
No.
Much less bear fruit, right? Like the whole bear fruit part. Some trees, avocado trees, they don't bear fruit for like 10 years. Like
So well, how did you know I have an avocado tree downstairs that's literally 6 months old? And my husband was asking me when we're getting avocados, and I was like, never.
Yeah. It's also there's the compound effect where if you're getting 1% better like every day, it looks like nothing for a while, and then all of a sudden it's like pow! And that's a thing that can be really exciting. And that's also why I love you talking about all of the books that have had a big impact on you, because I think that's something that for me it's the consuming of content, and it's the reading of a lot of books where you don't really see immediate results out of that, but like 6 months, a year later, you're throwing out knowledge bombs at cocktail parties or in calls with prospects because you've been reading a ton and you're able to really bring that knowledge to bear. But it takes time and it takes consistency.
Yeah. And I think, I know that we had wanted to talk about some of us have the privilege to have existences that weren't of a struggle, and we're like maybe in the Bay Area, and we're presented companies that are very fast growing and fast moving. And so our attention dollars and our personal brand are, kind of supplemented by the company's attention dollars as well. And so like being a part of LaunchDarkly, which is now pretty much a unicorn, and now Gravitational, which raised a 25 million Series A, these are very privileged events that I get to be a part of. And I don't take it for granted at all. And I'm very fortunate to have this experience. And so if you're in a situation where you are a part of a company that might not be as powerful or as big as these companies, understand that, and don't be mad that you don't have 5,000 people liking your post on LinkedIn. Be happy that you have the 5 that are prospects that are in your industry that you're pursuing, because that's really all you're looking for in the end is can I have a positive and valuable impact on my prospects. One thing that I think comes into point as well, we were talking about the mental health stuff, is you got to deal with your trauma to have a healthy relationship with these jobs, these tech sales jobs.
Yeah.
Me personally, I had a basically absentee fatherhood with my biological father and random stepdad around for a few years, but really just didn't have a positive male role model in my life to give me an influence that helped me be who I was supposed to be. And so I think figuring that out, and I started pursuing, I got a sales coach, which helped. And then I identified with somebody in my company that was a positive influence and really helped me get my mind right and understand the appropriate ways to handle things. And so there are certain traumas that we experience that can be a hurdle or a fence that prevents us from being successful. And I think that when I started figuring those out, it really improved my results, my efficiency.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't want to like come off as like, oh yeah, look at me, I'm doing so well. Like I know there's a lot of people out there struggling, and my message box on LinkedIn's open. I'm definitely not private. So if anybody needs any advice or wants to reach out or wants any of my systems, wants any of my programmatic emails.
Careful.
I'm definitely willing to help. It is something that I appreciate sharing. I think we as privileged individuals, like this podcast, sharing our knowledge and information is one of the ways that we can equalize this landscape and help other individuals succeed as much as we have.
Well, we so appreciate everything that you've shared. I think this was like kind of one knowledge bomb after another. Tons of really amazing information and support for everyone out there. And especially the fact that you are leaving the open door for people to come reach out to you. We will absolutely include like a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes for anyone that wants to get in touch. And the way we typically wind down these interviews is we have what we refer to as rapid fire questions. It's just a few kind of fun questions, I don't know, to wrap things up. So
it's time for the lightning round.
Yes, the lightning round. Oh my God. Yes, get excited. So first things first, because this is where our day starts. What is your more?
Yes.
Yes.
Narrating a motorcycle helmet just went on.
Can
Welcome
you hear me
to
still?
Yes. welcome to the Thunderdome. So what's your morning routine?
Oh, I have a good one.
I knew you would. I knew it.
I'm a big routine person. I feel like I mentioned this in my podcast with James Bowden about how golfers have a pre-shot routine.
Yeah.
And so like every time they get up to the swing, they do this. Same thing with baseball players. And they do the same thing over and over again because it puts their mind in line with the activity that they're going to efficiently perform. And so every morning I wake up, I take my protein shake bottle and I put water in it. I stick that in the microwave. I put a scoop of instant coffee in there and then mix in my protein powder, shake that up, let that sit for a little bit, go to the bathroom, do my like brushing teeth, shower, all that stuff. After doing all of that, I do some stretching, and I really just try to get my body aligned. For sitting in a chair all day is not an easy task. And so you kind of have to prepare yourself for it. And depending on whatever transportation I take to work, sometimes I Uber, sometimes I ride my motorcycle. And when I get in, typical, like go down, I'm not the kind of person that has 500 tabs. I usually have about 15 on each screen. So I go through each tab and I check my email, and then I check my, different software tools that I'm using. I check my LinkedIn, and I go look at where I'm at in my sales navigator approach. And so basically it's just this thing. And then once I've done all of those things, I get into kind of like the winging it kind of stuff that you run into.
So I have to ask, as a rider, what do you ride?
Oh, I have it's 17-year-old 2003 Harley Davidson Sportster XL Custom 1200. It's a classic that I found in some gentleman's garage that only had 2,000 miles on it.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and so I've been riding around. It's up to like 4,500 now, and I love it. It sounds good. The engine's in good condition. It's fun. It's a small bike, but I appreciate it.
It's perfect for Oakland. You don't want a big.
No.
You don't want a Gixxer or anything in Oakland. You won't get to use it. Or the cops will come get you.
No, I've never been pulled over. They're totally cool with me riding my old man bike.
I love it. All right. Pick one person who's had a significant impact on your career.
Ooh. Overall, I would say it's probably Seth Godin and his writing. I think it's been the most influential in the way I think about companies, brands, and how the prospect or customer receives that information. He's very intelligent when it comes to that, and it has helped me immensely in my successes.
It's awesome. Okay, fun one. What's your pump up song?
Oh, wait, hold on. This is a good one. I gotta get the title. Here it is. Hold on. Oh, it's gonna take me a couple seconds.
We could add it.
I don't have it memorized. I know it's called. Hold on. It's Rocking to Brock by Unique Syntax featuring The Atheist.
Okay, I do not know this one. I'm going to have to look this one up.
We will include link.
It's a very vibey. So I'm a disc golfer. I laugh when I say that because it's like there's probably like 100,000 of us in existence. But there's a content channel on YouTube, and they use this song as their intro song for their videos when they record rounds. And it's just a really cool, vibey, happy, put me in a great mood song that
that's awesome.
gets my mind right. Yeah.
I love it. All right. What's one thing you wish you'd learned earlier?
How to ask questions.
Yeah.
Like once you become a master at asking questions and understanding what the plausible answers are from the person on the other end, and what answers that they want to say, and how you can arrange the words in your question to more alleviate the tension for them having to give said answers. There aren't really any books on it. There aren't really, and it would be amazing if we all got together and wrote a book on something like that. But if I was a 17-year-old and somebody gave me a book and said, this is how you ask questions to people to get what you want, my life would be
It would change.
Yeah.
Totally. That's a very
that's
good
what
one.
a lot of young people struggle with, is they don't realize that you can ask for things.
Yep.
And the worst thing that happens is somebody says no.
Well, and it's also so hard when you're young. You don't always know what you are actually trying to learn. So
Mm-hmm.
it becomes even harder to ask really good questions. And when you
Mm-hmm.
get better at asking good questions, it helps you get to that. But it's sort of, I don't know, double challenge when you're young.
And I think in complement to that, asking those questions to Google and like having Google answer them.
Google
for you.
foo.
Like,
So
yeah.
the truly, like, anytime someone is like, you know, what's the most valuable thing, you know, as a marketer, I'm always like, I know how to use Google real well. Like,
Yeah.
because like everything is changing. And especially when you're in the startup world, you're always doing stuff you've never done before. And Google is just, Google is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's your favorite sales book?
I can't say Seth Godin because I already said him. But I like a lot of the content in Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, and not so much for the splitting the difference part. He that's not my goal. He uses a lot of really interesting dynamic concepts that really navigate conversation well.
Totally.
But outside of that, I just read this book. It's really interesting, called Crucial Conversations by Joseph Grenny.
Huge fan.
And it's it's not really a sales book as much as it is like an EQ book. But I listened to that book probably 30 times already on Audible, just to like remind myself that create a safe space for people to exist in. Everybody's important. Allow for yourself to recognize when conversations become unsafe or emotional. And so like when I got into that and understanding that, and understanding when I fail at those things, and being able to go back to those individuals that I failed and say, hey, I'm sorry I failed you.
No, I'll say this. I did a Crucial Conversations training a few years ago. One of the best things that I did during my time at Okta. I've given that book more often than any other book. Like, I've given it to my mother. I've given it to my husband. I've given it to several coworkers. It's just a really good, like I said, it's a really good EQ framework.
It can almost be insulting in a way, because it's like, hey, you're not good at having conversations.
Actually, usually it's more, I'm sucking at conversations with you right now. This is the framework that I use. Can we try it?
Can we do it together?
Please help me. Yeah, it's usually that. All right. What's one way someone could have been a better ally to you?
Shoot. I just, I'm an overwhelming personality, and I come off as fulfilling everybody's stereotypes about what I represent, both physically and mentally. And so I don't want people, I think I'm a lot deeper than what people think I am. And I feel like I miss that representation a lot because of the energy that I give off, and the type of environment I like to create for, my work life. And I wish that that was received in the way that I hoped, but it doesn't work out that way all the time.
So, especially keeping that in mind, what's some way that you are working to be a better ally to others?
Understanding. Remember how in the beginning of this conversation, this is a great segue, we talked about how you can't make somebody understand you, but you can choose to understand. Yeah. And so really looking into what somebody is wanting, and understanding that with them, and being a supporter of that. it's a difficult thing to be able to open yourself up for awareness. I think the whole movement of even the way our culture is starting to recognize proper pronoun use and things like that. Once you start getting into proper pronoun use, your eyes open up a bit more and your mind opens up a bit more, and you start looking at people without all of these identifiers, and you start looking at them as them. And I think that's a great place to start is if you are a person who's on the fence of like understanding why we're culturally getting into using proper pronouns and things like that, definitely start acknowledging it and start looking into it, and in understanding that maybe even pronouns aren't really necessary in 99% of conversations. Like, you don't have to say he or she when referring to a person having said a specific thing. You can result to they, them in a majority of statements. And it almost covers most proper pronoun usage dynamics that are needed. And so that's an interesting thing, is just really having an open heart and an open mind of why we are moving in this direction as a culture.
Love it.
A little note on proper pronoun usage I discovered the other day. You guys know the magician's Penn and Teller?
Okay.
They removed all sex-specific pronouns from their act over 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's an entire Vegas show with audience participation, and even when someone is called up on stage, they don't use sexed pronouns.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
As a huge fan of them, I thought back and I was like, oh my gosh, they haven't. If a Vegas show can do it without anyone noticing, it's kind of interesting.
Just takes a little effort, and it really is an indicator of where your heart is. If you're willing to put in that effort, then it'll happen.
Absolutely.
All right. So what's your guilty pleasure after a bad day?
I always say that when I eat at McDonald's, it's because I'm taking my antibiotics so I don't get sick. And so I'll go get
I love it.
go get a few hamburgers from McDonald's and just scarf them down. And then also, I'm a unknown right now. I'm doing a elimination diet soon, but it's either lactose or casein intolerant, and so I eat the non-dairy ice creams.
So as someone with a lot of intolerances, 9 times out of 10, it's both.
Yeah.
And it's also, I hate to break it to you, it's also probably whey.
Yeah. No, I know. And I see the reactions when I eat it, and it's like, I don't want to like.
Yeah, but don't do what I did, and then I went for the egg white protein, and then I basically overdosed on egg white protein, and then I started developing a sensitivity to eggs.
Yeah.
So, do the mix, you know. Yeah.
Please, I wake up every day thanking God that I can eat cheese and bread.
Oh.
Don't take my cheese and bread from me. I
still eat it. It's just I suffer, and so do the individuals who are sharing the room with me.
That is the most honest end to an interview ever. I love it.
Well, thank you. Seriously, this was an amazing interview. There was such incredible value, and we both really appreciate the vulnerability and the honesty. It was refreshing, and I think very, very helpful.
Thank you. It was nice. Yeah, I like having talks like this because I don't think they're had enough, and I think people are in the dark about like why certain things are the way they are, and opening up
and that we can change them.
Yeah, we can easily, very easily. We can change them.
And on that note, we'd love to hear from all of you, dear listeners. Make sure to hit us up on social. Check the show notes for all of Micah's information. I'm counting on you to flood his inbox, asking for those programmatic emails, as I'm probably going to.
I'm writing a post. I'm going to be writing a post on it soon. Beck is actually interested in working with me on something. I don't know if she still is. She was a while ago, but.
Yeah,
Well,
Flip the Script's wrapping up, so we'll see if we can get her
Yeah.
attention again.
yeah, we'll share the link with us when it's live, because we will absolutely share it with the audience and add it to the show notes, because I'm sure it will be very, very helpful for everybody.
Yeah. Awesome.
Brilliant. And on that note, please make sure to hit us up on social. We look forward from hearing from all of you soon. And thank you for listening to another episode of The Other Side of Sales.
Thank you.
Bye.